Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel. And this week we are looking at how Christianity helped to form and forge the Western civilization that we all know and love. Or at the very least, that we all live in. You know that it's Christmas time again. Carols are played on the radio and in every store's intercom system. Houses are lit up. Trees are up. Santa Claus is at the mall. And the annual bashing of the season, Christianity and of Christians, is in full swing. Sometimes this bashing is pretty petty, like way back in 2013 in Vice, when Aisha Harris wrote that Santa Claus should actually be portrayed as a penguin so as not to ostracize black kids. Sometimes it's predictable, like when the ACLU or the Freedom From Religious Foundation, remember those guys, files a suit against some small Midwestern town because it set up a nativity scene outside the county courthouse or outside of City Hall, and the one atheist within a 15-mile radius somehow got offended or felt unsafe because of it. And sometimes the attacks are a bit more substantial. Go to Google and in the search engine type in "Jesus was not born of a virgin" and you will be surprised at all the hits that come up from reputable sources such as the UK Guardian, which has several stories all claiming that Jesus wasn't born of a virgin, that such stories actually go against the grain of Christianity. You will also notice that all these stories seem to appear around Christmas time. This year, the attack comes in the form of a Netflix comedy special entitled The First Temptation of Christ, created by Brazilian YouTube group Porta dos Fundos. The 46-minute special shows Jesus coming home to Galilee for his birthday party with his friend, named Orlando, who really hints that he and Jesus are more than just friends. If you know what I mean. Actually, that's a lie. He doesn't just hint it, he flats out and says it, for all intents and purposes. How else are we supposed to interpret lines like this from Orlando? "In the heat of the desert, I saw the size of his huge power." What are we, 4? We get subtexts, we see the winks that Porta dos Fundos was giving itself, and even if we're not all adults here on the Stone, the culture has made us grow up a lot more quickly than we used to have to, so the point still stands. Of course, this created a huge backlash, and in reaction to that, Porta dos Fundos released a statement which, in part, said that it, quote, "values artistic freedom and humor through satire on the most diversive cultural themes of our society, and believes that freedom of expression is an essential construction for a democratic country." And the reason why it's all a lie is actually pretty simple. How exactly is Christianity diversive, especially in a country like Brazil, where 86% of the population still to this day identifies as Christian? You either accept it or you don't. And even if we accept Porta dos Fundos' statement that Christianity is a diversive cultural theme, they chose to satirize it in the lamest way possible. Yeah, sorry to say it, PDF, but people have already beaten you to the punch with the whole "Jesus was gay" mantra. There was Paul Shore Ghost, the openly gay senior pastor, who said back in 2014, quote, "For my own spirituality, I would love to jump into bed with Jesus." There was Roland McCleary, who back in 2004 wrote a whole book where he argued that Jesus and all 12 of the apostles were gay. There was Paul Osterreicher, who in 2012 in the UK Guardian argued that the special relationship that Jesus had with the Apostle John proved that both men were gay. And of course, we've had the whole lineup of art saying the exact same thing. So, yeah, you're kind of behind the ball, PDF, on this one. But the real issue is actually hidden in the part of the statement where Porta dos Fundos said, quote, "freedom of expression is an essential construction of a democratic country." True, but there's a minor and a major problem with that statement. The minor one being, that still doesn't mean that it's okay for PDF or Netflix to create or to release this comedy special during the Christmas season, the second most holiest time for Christians after Easter. The equivalent would be making a comedy special about the Prophet Muhammad being gay during Eid ul-Fitr. In fact, a lot of people on Twitter made that exact same point, asking Netflix when they were going to see that special. Asking, I should say, in a rhetorical sense, because we've known that living in a modern society means being tolerant of other people and other beliefs, but we've also known for the same amount of time that that tolerance and that respect is only a one-way street. And the same thing was proved again here. But the major issue is this, and the reason why you clicked on this video in the first place. Attacking Christianity at its core, like this, is an attack on Western civilization. Now, Western civilization has several tap roots. There's Jerusalem, which gave us the idea of a transcendent God who acts as an eternal standard of the good. There is Athens, which gave us reason and rationality. There's the city of Rome, which gave us the idea of personal virtue for the keeping of the common good. But Christianity is just as important as these other centers of discovery, innovation, and progress. And the reason comes from one of the central tenets of Christianity, that every single person is made in the image and likeness of God. Judaism, Jerusalem, had already given us this idea in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, where Yahweh says, "Let us make man in our own image." But here was a problem, because God in the Old Testament, although a personal God, was still far removed from the individual person. He was outside of time and space. So what exactly did it mean to be made in the image and likeness of God? Well, Christianity answered this, and it deepened this idea, like it deepened everything else that it baptized. And it answered and it deepened this idea in the Gospel of St. John, at the very beginning, where John the Evangelist says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The English word being translated from the Greek word logos. And from this idea of what and who God is stems some of the core tenets of Western civilization. Most of us have heard the Greek word logos be translated, if not into word, then into our word reason. But logos actually encapsulates a lot more than just plain reason. The Greek philosopher Aristotle, one of my heroes in case you didn't know, argued that logos was the ability for men and women to actually know what a thing was on a metaphysical level, to know its essence, to know what made a thing that particular thing. Sort of like how a man and a woman know each other after sleeping together. There's a big difference, after all, between seeing and recognizing that a tree is a tree, and then in being able to know why a tree is a tree, knowing what makes a tree a tree. Logos, in other words, was the ability in man to actually touch reality. And it is this ability to touch reality that actually enables us to decide what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. Because after we know the essence of things, we can make ethical decisions about how they are supposed to be used and how we are supposed to act. But there is more to logos than just that. It is also the power that allows us to create. Aristotle again said that logos gave a person the ability to see something from a different angle, to approach something from the POV of another person. In other words, logos allows us to use our imaginations. The 16th century mystic, St. John of the Cross, built on this aspect of logos, saying that it gave individuals a power that allowed them to express themselves poetically and creatively, whether that was in a painting or a drawing or a song or in a short story. Okay, you might be saying, that's great and all, but what does that actually mean in the context of Western Civ? Quite a lot, actually. First, the idea of logos means that everyone is a unique individual person and that we are all naturally equal to each other. Logos is what makes us, in Christian anthropology, made in the image of God. And since logos, as Aristotle says, gives us free will, the ability to choose the right thing for the right reason, which implies that we could choose to do something differently, the implication is that we are all unique. We're not puppets on a string, cut from the same cookie-cutter pattern. We're not predestined to be one particular thing or the other. We are free, both terrible and powerful to behold. As Russell Kirk wrote in his book, The Roots of American Order, Christianity was the first system to tell its followers, and the world in general, that you have to make moral choices every day. Moral choices that stay with you forever once they have been made. In other words, we are yoked to freedom, and we can't abuse it, nor can we escape it. The idea of equality stems from the same idea. Since there is nothing higher than God in the Christian hierarchy, and since every person is made in the image and likeness of that God, it stands to reason that no one person, no one class of person would be more equal than anybody else. Now, there have been a ton of practical applications of these ideas in the West. One prominent example of this is the first sexual revolution, which actually recognized the personhood as well as the intrinsic dignity of people such as women, children, and even slaves. Writing in the magazine First Things in January of 2018, Kyle Harper said this, quote, "In his, Paul's usage, prostitution was a synodoche for the many forms of erotic permissiveness in the culture around him, moving in a society where it was totally unexceptional and casually expected for men to indulge their sexual desires with prostitutes, slaves, and others who lacked social honor. Paul forbade it. Not only that, he proclaimed sexual congress to be a mysterious union of the flesh, something of transcendent significance. The body is a temple, a site of sacred communication. Sexual sin, therefore, is a kind of pollution, as scandalous and disruptive as the desecration of a holy sanctum. We are a long way from the rigorous but pragmatic counsels of Epictetus. The Stoic urged self-control, on the grounds that physical pleasure was a dangerous distraction from the virtuous life. Paul does so because sex implicates us in something with sacred significance." Harper goes on to say that because of Christian sexual ethics, especially as laid and thought out in the letters of St. Paul, that these sexual ethics became inclusive. They applied to everyone. So, in other words, no one, not even slaves, were to be exploited because everyone was made in the image of God. This even led the Christian Roman emperors of the 5th century AD to take, quote, "proactive, if still by our standards limited, measures to protect the bodily integrity of vulnerable women, the heightened place of sexuality in the overarching structure of morality, the respect for the human dignity of all persons, and the insistence on the value of the transcendent and sacred over the secular and the civic, these all went hand in hand in the growth of Christian culture." I should also note here that it was the Christian ideas of the sacredness of the human body as well as natural equality that actually led the West to being the first geographic location in the world to abolish slavery. Whether it was William Wilberforce in England or American Quakers in the 18th century, it was people driven by Christian ideas who eventually led to the emancipation of slavery as well as the abolishment of slavery and the slave trade. And in a world that had always known slavery, and some parts of the world still do, sad to say, that is no mean accomplishment. These ideas also led to the growing idea of self-government in the West. If every person is made in the image of God, and therefore we're all naturally equal, then it's not really much of a stretch then to say that people have the right to rule themselves in some form or fashion. Clearest example of this happened in England when the barons, helped by men like Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury, forced King John of Robin Hood fame to seal the Magna Carta in 1215. This was the first time in Western history where a ruler had been forced to legally acknowledge that he wasn't a despot, that he couldn't just do whatever he wanted with his power, because he was under the law like everyone else. And he was under the law like everyone else because he was made in the image of God like everyone else, and therefore was just as equal before the eyes of God as any one of his subjects. And yes, I know that outside of a few city-states in Italy and later on the Netherlands, most of Europe for most of its history was ruled by kings, and that kingship was seen as being the best form of government. But even here, there were some caveats, some provisos, some quid pro quos. In his political treatise on kingship, St. Thomas Aquinas said that if a king actually became a tyrant, if he started ruling for his own good and not for the common good of his subjects, then the people actually had a positive right to overthrow him and to start again. You didn't see that sentiment outside of Europe. And another result of these Christian ideas was progress. Yes, you heard me right, gang. Because of Christianity, to paraphrase Dr. Rodney Stark, only in Europe did astrology, for example, become astronomy. Only did alchemy become chemistry. The reason? Well, remember when we said that Logos gives people the ability to understand what a thing's essence is, what makes a thing what it is. Because of this, as well as the theological understanding that the Christian God was a God of reason and not simply of will, like he is in Islam, which meant that reality wasn't suddenly just going to shift on people, there was faith and certainty in Europe that nature could be explored, it could be discovered, and it could be understood. This was a big reason for the creation of the university system in the Middle Ages. And from the university system came the discovery of the process of induction, as well as the scientific method itself, which led, for example, to Thomas Bradwardine, investigating physics, kinematics, and velocity before Galileo. It led to Orosemi making a compelling case for a heliocentric rather than geocentric universe before Copernicus. It also led to practical inventions like the mechanical clock and the horse-drawn plow. Christianity was one of the molders and then one of the pillars of the society that we all enjoy, whether we realize it or not. And attacks against it, like we see every Christmas time, are attacks on that society, whether we recognize it or not. And that's a problem, because if you attack the source, you're also attacking all the fruit that that source gave you. The nihilist German philosopher Nietzsche recognized this. His ideas that God is dead and that the Superman would create his own morality are connected. Because God is dead, everything that is predicated on his existence collapses with him, which means that everything has to be rewritten. And it's the same thing here. But as always, what say you? Can Western civilization and everything we enjoy about it only be kept with Christianity as well as its other taproots? Or is there a way to actually have our cake and eat it too? Get rid of Christianity, but still keep the benefits of Western civilization? As always, let me know your thoughts, ideas, and opinions in the comment box below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by leaving a comment, giving it a like, and sharing it with your friends on social media. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, and religion, but from a different POV, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to ring that bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos like this every Tuesday. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a bit of your time. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed to my channel. I appreciate you all. And I will see you here next week, gang, on top of the stone. Ciao.